IVF is often called a modern miracle, rightly so. But behind the success stories lies a system that is shaped by privilege, impossible choices, and soaring costs. I had the chance to sit down with Mary Fusillo, CEO of Family Planning International, and we talked about what really happens behind all of the fancy brochures, from the moral gray areas to the collision of technology and human care. And yes, we got into the weeds with the insurance nightmares. Really, we cover it all. So thanks for listening. I'm looking forward to hearing your thoughts on this conversation on Redefine Her. Here we go. Today's guest is Mary Fusillo, who is a trailblazer in the world of fertility and third-party reproduction. She's the founder and CEO of Family Solutions International, which brings together egg donation, surrogacy, and fertility consulting under one mission: to make family building more compassionate, ethical, and accessible. A nurse by training, a bioethics scholar in progress, and a founder who started with $27,000 in credit card debt and a vision for something better. Mary is here to talk about what it really takes to change lives and lead with integrity in a rapidly evolving industry. And that cannot be underscored enough. Mary, welcome to Redefine Her. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited.
Me too. Let's actually start right with where you are today with Family Solutions International.
Well, we just had our 18th birthday on the 14th of August, and I started it as a donor egg agency locally. I had been working in the fertility world for a few years. I had had management positions. I actually left a job as a consultant, which is the greatest job ever because you fly around the country and have lunch for a living. It's really fun. But I had little kids and I was like, I can't do this. I can't run around the country all the time. So I spent 8 months building a game plan, a business plan while I was flying places. So I had this notebook where I wrote down everything, and I had a one-page website, and I launched it. I hit go on August the 14th, 2007. I had probably less than zero confidence. The weird thing is I had no confidence. I thought that I would sit at home while my kids were at school and I should be working on my business, and I would eat chocolate covered cherries and watch Oprah. And I turned into a workaholic. It was the opposite thing. I just was like a rat on a Cheeto, all the time. And so I did that. My first year I had 50 clients, which is a lot to go from 0 to 50. Then the next year I had 60, and then I went up and up and up. And then in 2012, I added surrogacy because so many of our clients were also looking for surrogates. And about the time that same-sex marriage was legalized, I started getting a lot more same-sex couples that were interested in having a baby. And then in 2020, cost has gotten so astronomical and people are just upset about everything. And here they are, I'm 35, I'm trying to have a baby, and all they want to do is IVF. As I get say private equity started coming into the field a lot. The prices started rising. And so we started the fertility consultants as a way to help guide people, not medical advice, but just kind of, this is what you can do. This is how you move forward, et cetera. And so I put them all under one umbrella called Family Solutions International.
Smart. So that is 3 different companies: the donor
Right.
solution, Three Sisters surrogacy, and then the fertility consultants.
Right.
Tell me about the evolution of this platform that really does span all of those things: donation, surrogacy, consultancy. And then where did this start and what connected the dots for you personally?
I'll give you the quick bio, which ties it all together. I got out of college. I thought I was going to be a journalist. I had a degree in journalism from the University of Texas at Austin. I actually got a job being a journalist on a newspaper, and I literally could not eat on the salary. And this was back in the day where there was not a gig economy. I couldn't drive Uber at night. I couldn't do DoorDash. I couldn't do Grubhub. I couldn't go work at Starbucks. I could babysit. I lived in San Francisco, and at the time I lived in San Francisco, there weren't a lot of babies, okay? There was not a lot of babies. There was a lot of gay men, but there was not a lot of babies. And so I couldn't do anything. I literally lived hand to mouth. And my roommates and I all lived hand to mouth. We were all in the same boat. And so after a few years of that, I actually went into public relations, which is where journalists go to die. And nothing against PR people, but it wasn't for me. I actually worked in a resort company that my job was to like fix it if something horrible happened on your honeymoon at the resort. Sounds glamorous, but it wasn't. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't like a Ritz-Carlton or anything. And so I said, I got to do something. I'm drowning. I couldn't do anything. All I could think about was how to feed myself every month. And my parents would throw me, some coins now and then. So I decided, hey, I had looked at going to nursing school and I didn't really want to do it, but I thought I still am interested in it. I'm good in science. I'm going to do it. So I went to nursing school in Los Angeles. When I got out of nursing school, the pay wasn't that much better, but it was steady. I never had to worry about a job. So I spent 10 years climbing up the ladder in nursing. And after I had my twins, I thought, oh my gosh, I can't do these 60-hour work weeks, director of critical care. I can't do any of that. And actually, I found out from a friend of a friend, this is like the whole networking thing, an IVF clinic was looking for somebody who had deep management experience in nursing because this was the beginning of the big boom in fertility. Basically, IVF, fertility, donor egg was about 15, 18 years old. So you think, really? It was that young? So I got in right when they were starting to blow up. It wasn't just a doctor's office. It was actually like a mini hospital. You had an operating room. You had waiting rooms. You had ultrasound rooms. They did minor procedures. So I got on board and we started a donor egg program because they went from a couple hundred people a year to thousands of people a year doing donor eggs, went to a larger clinic on the East Coast as their nursing director, left to go consulting. And that's when I started having this evolution. There's got to be a better way. At the time, I know this is for people that don't have a lot of information about third-party parenting or IVF and donor egg is at the time, if you came in and they were like, your ovaries are shot or you're too old or you have a disease, at the time they couldn't do genetic testing. You have a disease, like for instance, let's say you knew that someone in your family had a deadly disease. It was a crapshoot if you were going to give it to your child. So they would sometimes use donor egg. And the doctor would say, okay, well, I got this great donor for you. She was a receptionist down the hall, or she works with the embryologist. And it was like there was no choice. And people were starting to go, wait a minute, would you let a real estate agent pick your house? You're going to let someone else pick your kids' genes? So there was started to be these people that were running these agencies where they recruited young women, vetted them to be egg donors, and then you went to them to find your egg donor instead of the IVF clinic. IVF clinics still had in-house pools, but for the most part, they would have 10 donors. So there you are, you have 10 choices, whereas agencies have 200, 300, 400 donors to choose from. So I built this business plan based on transparency. I wanted the donors to really shine. I wanted a lot of information about them. At the time, there was a 3 or 4 page kind of information sheet about the donor, basically height, hair color, eye color, family, health history, but it didn't say what she was like. It didn't say what drove her, what she was passionate about, what was her favorite childhood memory, how was she close to her father and mother, what's her favorite book, what color does she like, if she could be anything in the world, what would she be? Personality questions. And over the last 18 years, we've expanded on that to the point where people have videos, they have 10 childhood photos, that kind of stuff. So that was kind of where I started the donor solution.
Amazing. And so with your own fertility journey, did you have challenges getting pregnant? You mentioned you had twins yourself.
Yes, I did. So we were a little older and we didn't want to waste time. So at the time, I was 35 or 36 and they said, you know what? You should go straight to IVF, skip the 6 months of trying everything. So we did. I was fortunate because my husband's insurance paid for the whole thing. Paid for medication, paid for the procedure, paid for everything. And so we were very fortunate because even back then, my kids were born in 1998. So it was a $12,000 deal, which now people will be like, oh my God, I can't believe that's so cheap. No. That was massively expensive. Now it's $30,000. But at the time, how were we going to amass that $12,000? We were newlyweds. We just bought a house. It was insurmountable. So I was very fortunate. It worked the very first time. I had a boy and a girl. One and done.
Yeah. Which is pretty fortunate, right? The American Medical Association has reaffirmed that IVF is essential care, but political pushback has really stalled that in so many states. But from the time that you started going through your own journey with this, and then evolving 18 years now, as you mentioned, what are some of the gaps that you've noticed that you have really targeted to improve?
When I say they, I mean the big, large IVF. What I feel they did is in the race to be high tech, they lost patient care, because back when I did IVF, I had my own personal nurse. She was my nurse. Okay. I mean, that's who she was. That's who I could call. She gave me all my results all the time. After I was pregnant, I actually kept up with the doctor for a couple of years. We were all in it together, team effort. And now it's like case management. And now your case manager is Brenda, and she's going to guide you to this next step. And everything is like wrote, and here's your deck of PowerPoint presentation to tell you what's going to happen next. There's no one-on-one. And I wanted to bring that back. I talked to every single person that wants to start a surrogacy journey.
And it is such a personal journey. To have a more concierge experience seems like that would be absolutely critical. But healthcare is a business, and especially with IVF, that is a big moneymaker out there. And so for you to say, like, I am positioning this to make this experience better for people, I think that probably has come with its own challenges, but also its own rewards.
The biggest challenge, which took me a long time, and from a business perspective, I'm not going to get, an honorary degree from Harvard Business School, because I looked at it from a more personal standpoint. So when I was developing my fees, not necessarily when I started the donor solution, because it was kind of like, what's everybody else charging? I'm going to charge that, right? But when I got to surrogacy, people were starting to charge astronomical amounts of money to find a surrogate and to manage the cycle. And I was like, I don't see it. So I worked backwards. What does it cost? Versus I'm going to charge this much of money and then I'll make it all up. I said, okay, what's my people cost? What's my overhead cost? What's my database cost? What's my advertising cost? And that came up with that number. And then I added in profit, and that came up with a number. And for many years, we've been in business on the surrogacy side for 13 years. I'd say for 5 or 6 years, we had one of the lowest agency fees. We had huge amounts of people that wanted to come to us because we were literally 50% of what other people were charging. The problem was it's very hard to recruit surrogates. And the big guys that got private equity money, they were able to go and spend 10 times as much as we did on advertising. So we were not able to keep up with the demand, because we would have 35 or 40 people on a wait list for surrogates, and it would take 6 or 8 months or a year to find them a surrogate because we couldn't bring in enough. So I pivoted after COVID. I did a lot of research and said, I'm going to position myself somewhere between medium and high. So I'm in kind of, the 75 percentile range, and I'm going to offer this. And that cut down on our wait lists because people are always looking for the best deal, but it also meant that we had much more money to spend on advertising.
Yeah. Which in this day and age, and 18 years ago, is probably a bit more effective than now with all of the tools that's out there, because TikTok and Instagram, there's so many experts in the field, and it's like so challenging to really understand what is truth versus what is a bunch of bullshit. And then that emotional journey for people is for real.
Well, I had a big problem. 50 to 60% of my peers in the surrogacy business do charge a large fee up front. First of all, I'm risk adverse, so I did not want to have all these people's money sitting in an account. Number one. Number two, I felt that left people with no choice. Okay. So if you have $15,000, $18,000, $20,000 of somebody's money, and even some of them were $35,000 or $40,000 of some people's money, they can't leave you if they want to go a different direction. And they have airtight contracts. And I just didn't want to be that way. It was part of my ethics things I was going through at the time. What is an ethical way to treat people? And because people can't have a baby in the previously called natural way, I don't think you should penalize them by jacking up the prices.
What is the average price these days of fertility treatment?
For IVF, it can range from a low of 10 or 12,000. There are some new companies out there that are really trying to do a more low cost IVF. They also are looking at basically you need IVF. They're not doing any of the, why do you need IVF? And we're going to do all these tests and we're going to try this first. No, they're going, you need IVF, come straight to us. And we're due IVF. And that's 8 to 12,000 plus the medication. The big issue is the medication, just like everything else in this world, pharma, the medication has never improved in the 26 years I've been in the business. There's no new drugs. There's not any breakthroughs. It's the same drugs. And they still charge you $3,000 to $5,000 for a cycle of the drugs. Okay. It's like, really?
And this takes sometimes multiple cycles.
Right. And Express Scripts isn't paying for it. I mean, Walgreens, they're not giving that to you for free. So then regular IVF is probably anywhere from 12 to 20. Okay. And then you add in donor, you're adding another 10, 20,000 to that, depending on where you get your donor, how expensive her compensation is, what's your clinic going to cost. Now you're paying drugs for the donor. Then you get into surrogacy and you're adding, do I need regular IVF plus surrogacy? Well, that's probably going to be 125, 130,000. Do I need surrogacy plus donor egg? Now you're talking $150,000, $160,000.
Oh my goodness. And this is also people who are in the prime of their life, sometimes in their highest earning power years. And that's a lot of money. I mean, that's more than an annual salary for probably 80% of the population.
What's really made me sad about the entire industry is I've watched the evolution of the costs go higher and higher and higher. And yet pregnancy rates aren't any better. The drugs aren't any better. And people just keep adding more. Now we're charging this. On that note, what gets me is there's no reason to charge that. To me, it's greed.
You really made a decision that many founders avoid, and that is to grow without getting greedy. How do you define success now, and what trade-offs have you consciously made to protect the vision of your company?
It is a day-to-day struggle because it's really easy to go in there and charge more. Now, don't get me wrong. I am not bargain basement. My costs are, but we do offer a lot for our clients. I'm not the most expensive. I don't raise them astronomically. We've gone up $3,000 or $4,000 on the surrogacy side over the last 5 years, but then our vendors are charging us more. So, it's kind of like the whole tariffs thing. I mean, I got to charge you more because I'm having to pay more. The other thing is I run a very lean machine. I have people who's been with me 11 years, 9 years, so they never leave because as a woman-owned business owner, I understand what it's like. I did not have this grace when I was raising my children, but I understand you're raising children. There's emergencies. I'm gracious. We are one of those companies that has unlimited PTO. So if you need the day off, you just tell me. I'm not counting it against you. No one has abused it. Matter of fact, I have to make them take days off. I give maternity leave, even though that's really a struggle when you're a small company to give somebody 3 months maternity leave. We close at noon on Fridays. Every Friday we close at noon. And we have for the last couple of years.
Things like that in terms of a company's culture. It's so important to really be cognizant of a human in this world because it's not an easy world by any means. And then you throw children in there and you throw being the mom and then the weight of responsibility that we as women, one, take on, two, bear, usually, and in a lot of cases, by themselves. And even though we have men in our lives who are amazing and we need men, I will repeat that, not for everybody, it's not equitable. The home life balance is not equitable. And we could probably go down that road and have a whole conversation on how we need to really bring men up in this day and age.
I have a great husband. My husband has always been supportive of me. It's been amazing. But I will say, even this with no kids, we don't have all the clutter that you have when you have kids. And, they're long gone. I mean, they're 27, one's married, they have jobs, they're gone. But I still roll my eyes sometimes going, could you really? Could you do something? Because I do believe it's a genetic defect. They just don't see it. How can you walk by that and not pick it up?
Yeah, I am super lucky because, like you, I have a great husband and he does share the load. But I know so many people who that's not the case.
Well, it does change when the kids leave because when we had kids, we were both working and he had a big job and he traveled internationally and I traveled a lot and I had this business, which meant that every month we were like, okay, is it going to be good this month? Is it going to be good this month? And so living on that prefaces all the time can be very stressful. But I did realize that once the kids went to college, kind of backed off with a lot of the help. Okay. I don't mean that in a bad way, but it's kind of like I have to say, you know what? You do the cooking, but I do everything else. So you have to do the dishes.
Yeah, fair, right? We just need some more equity in situations. I think most women probably could say yes, 100%, please.
So I feel lucky that we have that. It's just, I think we're in the transition stage. So, kind of got a little weird. Back to what made me decide that I wanted to be this way. So this is like a pretty personal story, but I think it'll resonate. So when we were going to the IVF journey, they're like, okay, IVF is the answer. You got to do it. We went through, they said, your insurance is going to pay for it, the whole bit. So we start the process. And on a Friday afternoon, remember answering machines? Well, this is back in the day before there was like a lot of voicemail and you didn't have a cell phone. I get home from work and it's like 5:10 and there's this message on the answering machine that says, Mrs. Fusillo, this is so-and-so from the IVF clinic. And your insurance has denied your claim. So in order to have your egg retrieval, you're going to need to pay the $12,500. So, of course, I can't call him back. It's 5:10. My husband comes home. I fall on a basket case because, I was 38 by this time. This is my chance. And he's like, well, just going to have to save the money. We can do it in a couple of years. I was a nurse. This is before I got in fertility. I knew I did not have a couple of years. It's the only time in my life I felt like a character in a movie. I literally locked myself in the bathroom and cried, like for 2 days. It was so awful. And they said it was because we didn't have this medical diagnosis, blah, blah, blah. We did. We were old. My husband called his mother and said, I don't know why she's so upset. I told her we'd, save for a few months. And she goes, how much is it? I'm wiring you the money.
Oh my gosh, I have the chills.
I know. She was amazing. And so that Monday, she said, I'm wiring the money. And then the next day, my doctor actually got on the phone to the insurance company and said, you can't do this. We got a refund of my mother-in-law's money a month after my twins were born. And she told us to keep it.
Oh, what a very generous gift.
She was an angel. So the moral of the story is I know what that feels like. I have people who tell me I need donor egg. We've had 5 cycles of IVF. They don't know why. I'm only 34, but I can't afford this. We don't have $40,000. We don't have $30,000. We've spent all this money on IVF because they kept telling us to keep doing it. We'll find the one good egg. And that breaks my heart. So that's where the consulting comes in because I talk to them about, hey, the clock has stopped. Now that you need to do donor egg, the clock has stopped. You want to be a parent Tuesday, but you're no longer in a race against time. So now you can take a step back and reevaluate which direction you want to go.
CH2 Solutions believes technology should do more than just keep up. It should move business forward. Through nearshore solutions, CH2 delivers technology and talent that simplify complexity, fuel growth, and unlock new opportunities. CH2 Solutions is proud to sponsor RedefineHER, a community built on bold ideas and fearless leadership. Just like RedefineHER, CH2 knows progress happens when vision meets action. CH2 Solutions doesn't just deliver technology, CH2 delivers possibilities, redefining the future together. You have built this personal, very purpose-built ecosystem, and you've built this network of services from egg donation to surrogacy to consulting, really rooted in your own experiences. And this really is supporting people on some of the most emotional and high-stakes journeys of their entire lives. This is such a huge decision, one, to be a parent, two, to be told you can't in some capacity for a million different reasons, whatever they might be. And then you throw in their Instagram and these pop-up clinics, and there's just a minefield of conflicting information for intended parents. And it's emotional. As we discussed, the average IVF cycle can be $30,000, more cycles. Most patients need more than just one round. What are the biggest red flags that you see out there in the social world. And how do you tell people you've got to figure out this noise? Like, what is for real? What is a bunch of bullshit? And how do you avoid that landmine?
First of all, you never want to end up saying something to anybody that's going to end up at the front page of the New York Times. So you just got to steer clear of that. But my number one, OMG, run as fast as you can, is ovarian rejuvenation. Seriously? Are you on drugs? When women are born, they have every egg they're ever going to have. So at 46, we can't rejuvenate your ovary. They've been sitting in there for 46 years. They're not going to rejuvenate. Eating healthy, doing yoga, they are not going to regenerate. Nothing is going to change your ovarian reserve. Nothing you do is going to change it. What bothers me is there's a number called an AMH. It's anti-Mullerian hormone. It's all some wacky stuff. Okay. But anyway, it's kind of a number that tells you, hey, you've still got eggs left, or no, they're gone. So like we do it to all the egg donors. And I want to tell you what, when we get one that has low ovarian reserve, it's horrible. I have to counsel her that these are the choices you need to make immediately. I get joy of doing that because basically if she hadn't even applied to be an egg donor, she could have waited until she was 32 and then she could be calling me back. I've actually had egg donors at 18 years ago. They were an egg donor for me at 22 and now they're 40 and they can't have a baby. That's a sad one, but I will say they handle it with a lot more calm than a 44-year-old who said, well, I did everything. I did yoga and I ate beets and drank kale juice and why are my ovaries not rejuvenating? Because they've been there. They've already known, they've already given a gift. So they know somewhere in this planet, there is somebody who has my genes. I just want to be a parent. And my take home message about all that is, do you want to be a parent or do you want a child? And there's a big difference between the two.
Tell me more.
I see a lot of people that want to have a child. They want to have a child because they think they want a mini me, which is fine. You know, everybody wants a mini me. They want to make sure their kid goes to Harvard. They want to have an example. They want to have the child kind of pass through their success. So these are the people that look at egg donors as if they were shopping at Neiman Marcus. Oh, no. Oh, no. I got to have all these perfect traits, even though they themselves are not perfect. On the other hand, you have the people that go, yeah, I have these 5 donors and I like them. Which one's available next? And which one has the best chance of success? We just want to have a family. Oh, I love them. Because the ones that are like, well, I think to myself, oh my gosh, what if something tragic happens at birth and they have a birth accident and they have cerebral palsy? What if they are born and they're smart, but they don't have any drive or ambition? You can't inject that into them.
I don't think a lot of people consider, especially if you're not on this journey, you don't consider all of the things. If you do have a surrogate and something does happen, what do you do? And what do people do? It is a natural part of the birthing process. These things happen. And to come into an experience where you're at the end, you're almost to get your baby, and then, as you mentioned, there's a birth accident or there's some birth defect that you didn't know about, that's an emotional journey. And you've got to be prepared for that because that's just creating a family. That's not the Neiman Marcus baby. We can't have 100% all of the time.
I mean, everybody wants their child to be perfect. Okay. Everybody wants a perfect child. They want a child that's going to make them proud. They want to raise a child that's going to contribute to society. But so many times, I hate to use this word, but I've gotten a little jaded after 26 years and 4,000 people. Okay. Is the fact that there's people that want to be family. Even if it's a single person, they want to be family. And there's people that look at it as the next shiny object. As a tiny example, I had this couple years ago, like right when same-sex marriage became legal. And so they were all flocking to have babies. And I get it. Hey, just because I'm in a same-sex relationship doesn't mean I don't want to be a parent. I totally get it. So I had these 2 guys and they were wildly successful. And so they start the process. They get matched. They're about to have their embryo transfer. And they're like, okay, so we want you to help us find all the stuff we need. We're like, well, you mean like baby stuff? Oh, no. We're going to need this, this, and this. And because we have to go back to work. I go, okay, well, you know, what are you going to take? A month off, 2 months? No, we have to go back the next day. We need baby nurses. We need this. I'm thinking, what was the point? Just go get an Hermès bag. You know,
Right.
get a dog.
Yeah, and exactly. I think that's a really great point. It's like, consider that question. to the full extent. Do you want to be a parent or do you want to have a family? Do you want a child? Do you want to have a whole family and all of the baggage that comes along?
Now, I understand a lot of people don't wish to parent, and I understand that we're not talking to them right now. To me, it's being a parent and going through the good, the bad, and the ugly, which sometimes the good, the bad, and the ugly, most of it's ugly. Sometimes you're like, oh, I can't believe I'm doing this, it's such a part of the human condition. I can't imagine if I had not had my children. And there was times when I was thinking, what was I thinking? But when they're 27, sometimes you go, what was I thinking? Oh my gosh, they're just as needy at 27 as they were at 7. But that's, to me, is what you get out of it. It's not a one-way street. You're growing as a parent. It's like the same people that trying to teach their kid to read at 3, it's like, give it up. They'll read when they're ready to read.
Your teacher will appear when the pupil is ready.
Yeah, right. The teacher will appear when the pupil is ready. Like, my son didn't learn to read till he was 8, and everybody was thinking that he was going to be an idiot. And he ended up graduating cum laude from college with a double major in computer science. Okay, so we weren't too worried about that.
And again, it kind of just goes back to, it's like all about love. And so speaking of that, for so many people who are navigating family building, and legit, there are thousands of people who just finished in women's health program, a mini MBA program. And one of the participants in the program, she was talking about family planning herself. And the majority of her friends are using IVF to become parents. And it's challenging. It's a struggle, especially after loss or after failed cycles. And as we talked about, that experience really does feel like a minefield. You're grieving, you're Googling at 2 a.m., you're wondering what's wrong with you. You're wondering and weighing all of these decisions that cost thousands of dollars with literally no guarantee. How do you think about helping intended parents evaluate their options emotionally, financially, and realistically, when really the system often feels very overwhelming and, as you mentioned, ovarian rejuvenation, super predatory? People are taking advantage of people who are in a very vulnerable situation. How do you address that?
To me, it comes down to education of people. We don't take credit cards anymore. 5 years ago, we stopped taking credit cards because the credit card fees became predatory, and we were spending $30,000 to $50,000 a year on credit card fees. And that's almost a part-time person. I could have another person working for me, or I could spend more money on advertising or something. So we quit taking credit cards. But I have people who are like, well, we're going to cash out our 401k, and we're going to get a HELOC on our home, and we put your fee on our credit cards. And then I have to have a sit down, realistic talk about this, because it's not so much the people that get the baby, because they're like, I'm fine, I have the baby, we're a family now, and I have to pay this bill every month. It's the people that never get it. And that's a lot of people. I had one couple that I banged my head against the wall because they had one embryo made when she was 41, which means, not a great chance. And they literally thought that surrogacy was going to be the cure. And I looked at the clinic they were with, and it was a clinic that the bean counters ran the show. And the doctor that she was with is somebody who should have said, your chances of pregnancy in your uterus or somebody else's uterus are still less than 5%. And when you're doing surrogacy, the big money comes when you're compensating your surrogate, but you're still paying the agency fee, the legal, the insurance, the clinic. You're still out $35,000 to $40,000. And that's if you already have an embryo made before you even get to the transfer of the embryo into your surrogate. And I talked to these people. I said, do you have that much money to lose? Because you've already told me that you're stopping now and you won't do it. You won't go to donor egg. I respect that, whatever. And they were like, well, we're going to take out some loans, and we're going to borrow from our 401k. They were already in their 40s. Do not do that. I felt like going, they need counseling. To me, it's like, I can't do it all. I want to send them to mental health professionals who will go, you have to look at this fiscally, look at the chances. If you're willing to throw away that money on this chance, it's your last chance. We totally understand. We're respectful. But the surrogate isn't going to change the dynamics. It's the egg. And that is one of my big things. People don't get it. Oh, I'm going to use a surrogate. Why? Well, I'm 42. I have a better chance. A better chance at what? Your eggs are still 42. She's 28, but that doesn't make it suddenly going to rejuvenate your egg.
CDC suggested that there were over 300,000 reproductive technology cycles performed. That was in 2022. So I imagine that's even more now. Yet access remains highly inequitable. And as you mentioned, education is key, but access also is critical, and that financial literacy behind it, because really it's like 85% of the costs are really out of pocket. And that is a huge financial commitment and possible loss. And I don't know, how do you prepare someone for that journey? Having worked on both like the clinical and the consulting side.
I came from, a hospital setting where you never see a bill because you're working in the hospital. Somebody else is getting the bill. But their physician would go in and counsel them, and you would hear the tears. They didn't have any more money to go. But basically, this may be controversial to some people, but when I talk to people who are like, we're at the end of the road, we don't know what we're going to do, I go through all the scenarios. Okay. Well, surrogacy, egg donation, there's embryo donation. If your goal is to parent, then there's embryo donation. So you need a donor egg and you were going to use your husband's sperm. Well, you can't afford that $35,000, $40,000 gig, but embryo donation could be $5,000 to $6,000 because someone's donating their embryos that they didn't use. They're usually high quality, and you can pick some traits from them. And a lot of times they're very open and the people. So, that's an option. Okay. If your goal is to parent. So we go down the list. Adoption, unless you adopt through the foster care system or through the county or the city or whatever, adoption is just as expensive as IVF and just as filled with heartache and pain. And I'm an advocate for it for sure, but it's just as filled with just as much pain and suffering.
You mentioned in our initial conversations that your business kind of started out of Excel spreadsheets and then creating PDFs and, creating the poster surrogate, the poster person. But technology has changed. And so you have a new platform. You have place for people to really be able to put in all of their requests, but then also you educate and help them identify help them identify a good match. What would you redesign the fertility experience to look like to make it more user-friendly, more transparent, and more emotionally grounded? Because it's already, as we know, it's a journey. It's an expensive journey, and it can be incredibly heartbreaking. How would you change this from a technological perspective?
The one thing that I was a huge advocate for when I first got into this field, and yet I'm kind of like, oh, maybe that was, Pandora's box, was back in the day when I got into it in 1999, clinics would pick your donor and you never saw a picture and you had a little dossier. Okay. And a lot of us in the field that got in there in the early days changed the model, that you got photos, you could see a kid photo, you would be able to match kind of what you look like. So your child would fit seamlessly into your family. So there wasn't like, where'd that kid come from? That has opened up a Pandora's box of everybody wants the girls from Alabama TikTok Rush. They all want those girls. They want these gorgeous girls. And, it's like, okay, I get that. Everybody wants a good looking child, but have you seen your husband lately? I mean, come on. And so, really, he is no George Clooney back in the day. And so what gets me is I have to do a lot of education without hurting someone's feelings and getting them upset and angry at me to say genetics is a crapshoot. You see some families, they have 5 kids and they all look like little carbon copies. And you see 5 others, another family where it's like, those kids, where'd they come from? Because genetics is a crapshoot, and you don't know if your donor's egg is going to mix with your husband's sperm, and then the kid's going to look like her Aunt Gertrude and your husband's Aunt Flora, who are both kind of gnarly. Okay. You don't know that. And I think people put too much emphasis on the looks of the donor and not enough on the inner qualities. What is she interested in? What's her brain power like? Is she a math person? Is she a reading person? No, I think that they don't look at that. It's been the real thing that's made me the saddest in my business. Well, I got to tell you, I had this guy yesterday that filled out his little form, and he said, I am looking for the perfect donor because I couldn't find the perfect wife. Oh my gosh, red flags everywhere.
There's a lot of opportunity within becoming a parent using IVF. However, blonde hair, blue eyes, and the perfect looking child shouldn't be the top consideration. From a technology perspective, how do you feel like that could be improved to make the experience of utilizing a surrogate or doing IVF treatment or using a consultant to help with the process? How do you think technology itself can be improved to enhance this experience for the user and remove any of the drama and the predatory behavior that's out there, really preying on vulnerable people?
There is a lot, but sometimes I think maybe a lot is too much. For instance, back a few years ago, there was a company that came out that was going to use facial recognition technology to match you to your donor. So basically, they'd scan your face and then they would look through all these databases of donors and they'd go, here's the 3 that we think look like you the most. It was kind of a flop because people go, I don't look like that. I don't look like that. I don't look like that. And the deal is they were using the technology to measure the width of your eyes and the height of your forehead and this, and people didn't want that. I went through this phase years ago where everybody wanted a donor that looked like Halle Berry. Okay. Like all the Black women wanted, I look like Halle Berry. No, I'm not seeing that, but it's in the eye of the beholder. So I think that the idea is good, i.e. it needs to be tweaked to incorporate all the other things that you're looking for in a donor, their personality, this, that, and the other. So you could upload that information and these pictures of you at various stages in your life, and then they would find somebody that had most of those traits. I think that's a good thing. On the other hand, I think as we go towards more technology, some of the stuff that they were doing in IVF, like they had cameras that watch the embryos so they don't have to open up the little incubator door and pull them out and look at them every day. That's kind of a cool technology. It meant that they got disturbed less. They stayed in that little environment. There's more. I don't necessarily think that AI is the answer in fertility. We're already making people feel cold and alone. Do we really want artificial intelligence to make it more alone and cold? Which I think we will. I don't necessarily think that technology in itself is the answer to the problems that plague IVF, which is, to me, it's access, it's equity. And if you live in even a decent-sized town like Amarillo or Lubbock, they're decent-sized cities. They're a couple 100,000. They don't have an IVF clinic. So you're having to go to Dallas, which is hours away, because it's too expensive. And it's too expensive. One company is doing a really cool thing. Well, actually, 2 of them are. And it's kind of gotten a little controversial with a lot of the IVF crowd. What they're doing is they're training obstetrician gynecologists to do egg retrievals. It's not rocket science. It's a technique. And I always think those people that played video games as kids, they got it because you're actually, looking at a screen, getting the egg out. It's not rocket science. How to get the egg to the point where you get to retrieval, you got to have the training. You got to understand how the chemistry works, whatever. But the mechanics of it are something that even in Europe, nurse practitioner types do egg retrievals. So they're training these OBGYNs to basically do all of the mechanics of the IVF cycle, while someone in a different location is actually doing the science behind it. They need this kind of drug at this dose on these days to make this work. And that has lowered the cost because they don't need all this massive equipment or whatever. Then you only go to Dallas once to have your egg retrieval. That has been a help to train other people. But from a technology standpoint, I'm still kind of like, I don't know. I don't necessarily think it's the greatest thing since sliced bread to do more technology to take away the personal part of IVF.
You're now pursuing a PhD in bioethics, which is pretty interesting and maybe kind of rare, but also it aligns very well because you're at this intersection of there are a lot of ethical dilemmas in fertility treatment. And there are a lot of ethical considerations when it does come to things like AI and how the algorithm is being introduced into egg donor and embryo matching. What do you think when you are considering your now education in bioethics? How do you think we can improve IVF surrogacy from a bioethic perspective? How are you applying that with your company now?
I did get my master's degree last fall, so I have that degree now. So I have a master's in bioethics. So what I've found through my journey through bioethics, was that we're all rushing to this technology. Oh, let's do this, let's do that. But we aren't looking at the basic questions. What is ethical? Is it ethical for two 60-year-old people to create a baby with an egg donor, a surrogate, and this 60-year-old sperm? And yes, sperm kind of can get yucky too after a certain age. So at the end of the day, is that ethical? On the other hand, there's autonomy, reproductive rights. If they have the right to reproduce, they should be able to reproduce. So those are the ethical questions that nobody wants to answer in the fertility world. When is enough? When do you tell somebody you're 49 years old, quit trying to do IVF with your own eggs, because people don't get pregnant with their own eggs at 49, contrary to popular belief with the movie stars? Why are we sending all these young women to go have their eggs frozen instead of coming up with better childcare so that they can pursue their degree or they can pursue their career?
There was just a 60 Minutes episode on that, and there was a panel of women, and they all are freezing their eggs. And as a layperson, you might think that's crazy, or you might think this is amazing. And then as a business owner or as a company offering those services, that also sounds pretty fabulous. But is that because they want to get the most out of these women in their most prime years for being a business professional? Or is it because women also want to have autonomy and be able to do that? There's so many pieces to that question. You mentioned you had finished your master's. You're still working on your PhD in bioethics. You've obviously been steeped in your practice. You've been doing such incredible work for so many people. What ethical dilemmas in fertility really pushed you to go back to school, to get your master's, and now pursue your PhD?
I think it was a confluence of several competing issues in fertility. The first one that really kind of got me, which is kind of controversial, is what we call social surrogacy. Social surrogacy is when you don't physically need a surrogate, but you don't want to be pregnant. So it's not like I have diabetes or I had a kidney transplant or I'm deathly afraid of it. It means I just don't want to carry a pregnancy. It'll interrupt my job. I don't want to ruin my figure, even though women aren't going to necessarily say that. And that bothered me, that you were asking another woman to put her life on the line, and especially in today's world with, the state of women's health, to say you carry the baby because I don't want to. And I've had multiple women over my years doing surrogacy. One stood out in my mind, a woman who was a professor in a university. Her specialty was public health. And she had started a home for women in India so they could have a safe place to give birth. It was kind of a charity thing. She went 3 or 4 times a year, and she said, I can't be pregnant because I have to go to India to check on these people, and I can't be pregnant while I'm in India. And I thought, well, that's a little strange. So that's one thing. The other thing was the age that the clinics will continue to offer fertility treatment has inched up from when I got into it in 1999. It was late 40s. And then you were out, even if you were going to use donor egg. Then there was kind of a rule that the husband and the wife's age together couldn't be over 100. So he could be 60 and you could be 40 and you could do it. Well, okay, whatever. Or 35 and 55, whatever. And then it inched up to 110. And then now there's really no limit. So we get people that contact us that are early 60s. Now that we're going to retire, we have time for a child, and I just want to pull my hair out by the roots. So those two things were the big catalysts for me to kind of start thinking, oh my goodness, we got to deal with this.
Yes, and I imagine you have to balance both your personal opinions and biases with those ethical, very legitimate reasons. It's hard having a child. It's hard raising a family. And we can just face it, as we get older, it is harder to raise children.
I agree. I can't imagine having a 5-year-old right now. And you know what? I don't want one. Okay. It could be my grandkid down the road, but I don't want a kid. I studied this, and I wrote multiple papers in my degree process about people don't see it as the long road. They don't see parenthood going on. It never stops. They see this baby. They want a baby, and not to be rude, but I always kind of think, maybe have you thought about a puppy, Just get a puppy. And they're too old to foster. They're too old to adopt. So this is where we end up. And the argument has been that, well, people, raise their grandchildren all the time. Right. They raise their grandchildren. They don't have a brand new baby.
Right. I've taken a bit of an issue with the term like geriatric pregnancy, and it's someone who's over 40. That is pretty normal in today's day and age, but you step up to that age of really where you could possibly have grandchildren, and that's a lot. I mean, my husband and my mothers come and they hang with our child, and they are exhausted after a few days. It's a marathon. It's a long, long time. And my grandma used to say, I love to see the little angels come, but I love to send the devils home.
Exactly. Exactly. And I feel sometimes that in our society, and this is one of the other things that pushed me into bioethics, our society never says no. And you need to learn to deal with this, and we want to get some mental health counseling or whatever. That doesn't mean that you're crazy, but let's talk about your need and how you can channel that other directions. You didn't wake up at 60 and go, now I'm going to have a baby, and you've been married for 35 years. So what were you doing? So I feel like we don't say to people, I'm sorry, this is not going to be something that you can achieve, but let's see how we can channel that paternal and maternal instinct into another pathway. But in today's IVF world, because it has so much private equity, they see dollar signs before they see anything else. And so to me, it's very sad, because then what about that child? Can you imagine, and your parents are 80 and you're going to college?
And I think that happens in a lot of cases, for sure. I'm not going to knock it by any means, but in terms of the ethical gray areas that are being navigated when it comes to modern fertility treatment, there's a lot of them. So how do you unpack that? Patients wanting twins, even if it's medically risky. Aging parents or aging people who are wanting children, or health risks, whatever the medical concern might be. How do you really help coach people through and navigate modern IVF treatment, considering all of the ethical concerns?
One of the biggest issues that I face is the cost issue. Okay? And IVF has become like this smorgasbord, and pick from this menu. And you want to do IVF, you're going to do donor egg IVF, and you want to have PGT testing, which is pre-implantation genetic diagnosis testing. Do you want single gene testing? I mean, it's like a menu, and each thing costs more and more money. Yet everyone is risk adverse. They're very nervous about having litigation. Number two, it's all money. Let's say you take two guys and they're in their 30s and they have perfect semen analysis. So there's no sperm issues that you can see. They have great genetics. Neither of them carry any of the carrier statuses that is covered on that test. And then they have an egg donor, and she's also the same. Her eggs look good. She doesn't carry any genetic risk. And they've done a chromosomal analysis on everybody, so they know they don't have any translocations or weird stuff going on. So now you're going to ask them to pay another $4,000 for testing of the embryo to make sure the embryo, what are you doing? Why? You just did all this testing. And so what happens is the clinics are scared to say no, because it's $4,000 in their pocket. Of course, they're paying money to the testing facility, but they still get $4,000. But what if one of a billion happens and they miss something? So to me, it's like our country is so litigious that people are paying extra. Also, there's not, to me, enough information. Having your embryos tested doesn't tell you if they're good. It just tells you they don't have these diseases. It doesn't say, oh, you have great embryos. No, it can't tell you that.
Man, following the money, that's in every single industry where the big bucks are. It is bad. It's putting really vulnerable people as the target and as prey. It's taking advantage of them.
And it's so risky. I get this asked all the time, especially on the donor egg side. Well, if it doesn't work, do we get a refund? No. And no, you don't get a refund, not because I wouldn't want to, but because there's many things involved. It's not just me. There's an egg, there's a sperm, there's a uterus, there's a doctor, and there's an embryologist. Any one of those five could have one little thing go wrong, and you're not going to get a baby out of it. So you never hear the clinics say, oh, yes, we will take the risk. The clinics are they're my bread and butter, but I will say over the last 7-8 years with all the private equity money, they've become less consumer friendly and more reporting to the man friendly.
Yeah, and that's a slippery slope. What do a digital psychiatrist, an AI health coach, and a public health game changer have in common? They're not sci-fi, they're real, and they're redefining care for women today. On Redefine Her, we sit down with the innovators behind Talkiatry, Wave, Joylux, and many more, founders who are flipping the script on women's health with heart, grit, and bold ideas. If you're into big conversations and even bigger missions, hit like, subscribe, and leave a review. Even if it's a love letter or a strongly worded rant, seriously, we read them all. Find Redefine Her wherever you get your podcasts and come help us rebuild this industry from the inside out. Thanks for listening. Let's keep redefining her. You have clearly helped and carried a lot of emotional weight for many families. How many people do you think you've served over your career?
I'd say since I started in 1999, we're probably, somewhere between 3,000 and 4,000. My own company is probably at somewhere between 2,000 and so, because I've been around about 18 years. And then I worked at a clinic before that, but I did do 3 years of consulting in the middle, so I don't count those years. When I worked at a clinic, we're doing 100 a year, whatever. So I'd say somewhere in that range. For years and years, we cracked every single one, but now it's kind of overwhelming. But we have this enormous bulletin board. It's probably 5 by 5 in our office, and it has Christmas cards and baby cards on it. When I first started my own business, everyone sent us cards. Everyone let us know. It was a much more family, village experience. One of the things that's kind of been sad about this business over the last, say, 5 years is people don't feel that way. It's much more transactional, and we try to keep it real intimate, and we're here to help you and everything, because the clinics have gotten so big, they figure we're just another cog in the wheel. Although I will say we still have people that we, are part of our team, and we love them and they love us and everything, but it makes me kind of sad that we're not getting all the baby cards and everything we used to in the good old days.
3,000 people is a lot over nearly 20-ish years, but it still is a fraction of the population of people that are having children or trying to have children through IVF and other treatments. We also have to recognize this is a challenge for so many people because the system that they're moving through hasn't made it easy by any means. And I know you have evolved your technology stack, but how do you think overall, big picture and even more finite, how do you think technology could be better used? Not to speed up fertility or to speed up or increase the potential outcomes, but to educate people, to ease anxiety, and to create real equity in access.
One of the big issues that I've had is I've watched the evolution, because did IVF myself in the late 90s. So, we're at 28, 29 years since I did it, and I've seen this evolution. What I feel is lacking is the personal touch, because this is like some of the most intimate thing you can go through. You can't make a baby the old fashioned way. And now all these people are aware of that, and they're seeing you, and you're lying on a table with an ultrasound wand, in places that no one goes. And so I think that they've tried to make it still personal, but they haven't succeeded to me. IVF clinics have offered a lot of, we have a psychologist, and we have a beautiful meditation room, and we have this and we have that. And the pregnancy rates have gotten incrementally better because of tech, but there has to be a way to marry the human touch with the tech touch. Because one of the things that happened in my personal business is that we went to a CRM, a customer management relationship, that's built just for this industry. So that really helps people be able to get in and to have loads of information about potential donors or potential surrogates. So that has been a real improvement versus this pen and paper thing. These girls would fill out these forms, and then they would mail them to us, and we'd Xerox them, and then we'd mail them out to people. I mean, I can't believe this is what we did. Now they see multiple pictures, they see a video, they have all these things like, what's your favorite book and why? All these great essay questions. They really get a sense of who the donor is. That's a real good innovation. But you don't ever have any face-to-face usually with the people. And I think that's what tech is missing. How do we do that? Everybody runs to thinking that tech's going to improve it. And I hate to sound like one of those old ladies that's like, oh, no, I don't want it to be that way. No, I'm trying to say is that we need to slow down and say, where is tech going to help? And where does the human touch come in? One of the things I've seen probably since COVID and everybody blames everything on COVID. But seriously, when IVF clinics went from having licensed personnel, they didn't have the nurses, they didn't have a ultrasound tech that had gone to ultrasound school or whatever. They didn't have people who were invested in it as a career. And part of that is money, because it costs a lot of money to hire nurses with bachelor's degrees or nurse practitioners. Instead, they've gone to lower level or less educated. So a lot of medical assistants, a lot of people who never have worked in the field because of the cost factor. And so they don't necessarily come to the field with the same passion that other people do. Not to say that they aren't good, but for the most part, I've found that they've been lacking in the human side because it's a job versus a calling.
We can't generalize because
Right.
the path to like a PA or to an MP is so much more accessible than going to medical school. And
Right.
like that calling, there's many different ways to get there. A lot of people, I mean, I know I'm in women's health group, and there are so many people on the clinical side, on the academic side, and all they want to do is help. They want to help solve these problems. And so the same, there are MPs and PAs and MAs that really do want to help. We maybe could give them more education to do that.
Well, what I've seen is you only need one MD that did a fellowship in reproductive endocrinology really to run a big giant clinic, because the MD is basically there to decide which medications to give during certain times of the IVF cycle, or if you're doing an IUI cycle, or there to diagnose or to do surgery. Everything else can be done by mid-level providers. That has been very great, because then once you've trained the NP and the RN to do all this stuff, I worked at a very large clinic on the East Coast as the nursing director, and we had this system. There would be 5 nurses sitting there, and each had their cohort of patients, and the doctor would come in, the nurse would read the numbers. Her estrogen level is blah, blah, blah. She's on day blah, 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 and her follicles are this. And he'd say, okay, let's up her to this medication. The nurse would write it down, go to the next one, and then they would call all the patients and give them instructions. Worked like a charm, because you didn't need 5 doctors to do that. So that has been really helpful. What I'm seeing is then you could do the same thing with lower level providers, but they don't know the nuances of what's happening from a scientific background to explain it to the patient. So they're just spitting out the news.
Right, because then it becomes medical speak, and it's just terminology instead of compassion and like someone who's supportive and at your side through a really emotional journey.
Well, I have a peer, and she's also a longtime friend, and she is a reproductive law attorney, and her daughter was going through egg freezing. Her company offered egg freezing, and so it was a free benefit. So the daughter is at a very well-known clinic having this egg freezing, and my friend is texting me going, what does this mean? Because she's not getting this information. What does this mean? And so I'm like, what are they doing? The girl had a lot of follicles. She was in her 20s. And I was like, are they giving her information on how to prevent hyperstimulation and start eating more protein? And she's like, nothing. We're getting nothing. We get a video, we get like a deck that has this PowerPoint presentation, and we get a medical assistant calling us every day with the numbers. So that's what's missing, is that, what does this mean? You have a little tiny follicle over here, and you have a big follicle over here. We're going to try to get this one to catch up with the other ones so that you have more eggs at retrieval. They never said that to her.
Yeah. I remember having my child, and we had like birthing class. I could see that being really powerful because it helps to build community and increases education, and then also creates that sympathy and empathy within a group who are all traveling the same journey. At the same time, if people aren't watching the videos, if they're not looking at the information given, are they going to do that? And I think it's different for everyone, for sure. So it's really challenging. But then we talk about this all the time. ChatGPT, AI, machine learning, all the algorithms are being introduced into even egg donor and embryo matching. What's your take? Game changer or potential ethical disaster?
I think we're going to be walking a fine line. On a positive note, it might work more on the personalities where you're matching up people. A lot of my comrades in arms, they will do those personality assessment tests where you're an IJ, PQ, whatever, and they'll help people to find their donor that way. So I think there's good and bad. One of the things I try to work with individuals to talk about is you're not getting the girl. Okay, 99% of our DNA is all the same. It tells how to make an ear and how to grow fingernails. What you're getting is her unique traits that she also carries. And so finding somebody who has your unique traits, like, is she mathematical or you mathematical? She arty or you arty? I mean, that way your child is really going to be much more like you.
And that's interesting. I don't think people really know that until they're on this journey.
Oh my gosh. It helps that when I got into this business, I'd already had kids. I had my N of 2. I had twins. So I knew, okay, well, that one's doing this and that one's doing that. And they were born at the same time. What's going on here? It's like people say, well, what am I going to say when I'm in the hospital and people come to see the baby? And I'm like, you're going to say, thank you for coming to see the baby, because the baby looks like a little red monkey. The baby doesn't look like anything yet.
I look back at the birth announcements when Isaac was born. Oh my God, what was I sending out?
I know you thought, oh, it's the most beautiful baby in the world. And you're like, oh no, whatever. Exactly. Right.
Exactly. You've made a huge impact in people's lives, obviously, and really treading that path and the balance between personal opinion and bias and the ethical concerns, and then helping people to see and educate them and create that awareness for them to make those decisions. Because as you mentioned, it is their choice. One thing that I have appreciated as of late is all of these companies that are offering IVF coverage as a benefit. That being said, we've seen headlines around the fluctuating coverage, and it's first mandated and then it's reversed. And currently only 21 states, I think, are actually mandating some form of infertility coverage, and fewer cover IVF or require IVF being covered. Even with new proposals, implementation really remains inconsistent. What role do you think government and then obviously insurance should play in the future of reproductive health?
Well, you have an hour because we can talk about that for an hour.
I know.
What really bothers me from an ethical standpoint is this push to have more babies. People are not having enough babies. We need to have more babies. On the other side, you're going to have to deal with it. What the other side is, I really appreciate these companies that are offering things like egg freezing for women in professional fields. There's many companies out there that also, they run the benefits. So you work for this company and they partner with this company that then manages it, so that you go to good IVF clinics, that you have money. They're giving you X, Y, and Z chances. One of the problems is that most of those companies are the Googles of the world, or the Amazons of the world. They're just big companies that offer that. So a mom and pop company can't offer it. When you have a mandated state that says that you have to offer IVF coverage, fertility coverage, IVF coverage, if your company isn't bigger than 50 employees, the insurance companies are required to offer it to the companies. The companies can decide to pick it up or not. So what happens is, if your company goes, no, now my husband's company at the time was a very large company out of Massachusetts. We lived in Texas, and they covered our IVF 100%. It was all paid for. So we get very few people like that. But what gets me the most is people that will go and borrow against their 401ks, or they will get HELOCs on their houses. And then I think, what if it never works and they're paying this bill every month?
Oh, and it's criminal. It's like that reminder, the payment didn't work.
And this sometimes can cost $30,000. And can you imagine every month trying $500 a month? One of the reasons we have a huge dropout rate is people, they're done. They don't have any more money. One woman that always stuck in my mind about how we're not really doing this right is a woman who was a school teacher, and her husband was a fireman, and they did not have insurance coverage. So she quit her job as a school teacher to work the night shift at ACCOR, which is a international hotel group. They also have Motel 6. And she went to work as a night clerk, made less money, but the benefits were better and it covered IVF.
That is a major decision that women are facing today as they are
Right.
considering career changes or company changes. If they do want to have children, what does that look like? I know women in their 20s who are freezing eggs because they want to work and have children later. I know many women who are going through IVF treatment and they're still working and it's exhausting.
Getting that time off, literally, you're every other day, you're lined up in this waiting room. They're calling to get their blood done, do the ultrasound, then you wait till the afternoon, and you're sitting there, and the medication is out of control. It's $3,500 to $5,000 for one cycle of medication. And that's my other big beef. It's like everything else. How come it costs that much here, but in Europe it doesn't, and they use the same drugs?
That is across the board. At the same time, if our supply chain breaks down and we're not getting pharmaceuticals from other countries where they're mostly manufactured, we're going to have a whole population of people that are dependent on their drugs that aren't going to get them.
Equity to me is one of the biggest issues in IVF, because when I was working on my project for my dissertation, which was about private equity and fertility, there was this article I found that I was like deep dive into it, that found out that when private equity took over IVF clinics, they tended to move the offices to the highest per capita wealth in the city. So in other words, they would go to the zip code where there was the most money. And like in my town, there's a lot of brand new IVF clinics. They're all clustered in the wealthier areas. They're not in the burbs. They're not where it's middle-class people. So middle-class people, they have to drive into town. Houston's enormous. It takes you an hour to get anywhere to go have this monitoring. There's nothing locally. And so it's kind of a sad situation, because they've gone after the people who can pay, yet there's plenty of other people that maybe together they make $150,000 a year, which is a decent salary, but they can't afford $30,000 for an IVF treatment.
I also am not sure the solution. We've touched on several things. One, IVF should be accessible. And in 2024, American Medical Association did affirm that IVF is essential care, should be. But there's always the political pushback and someone else's opinion who has continued to stall progress in so many states. Two, education. It's not just a shiny new object. Building a family is a serious commitment and it's a long-term investment. And as you mentioned, do you get a baby or are you building a family? And then the human component and that compassion, because it's an emotional, long journey and it's expensive. And so I don't know the solutions to any of this other than I hope everyone who is going through treatment to become pregnant, to become a parent, has a girlfriend chat group that they can connect with via text, because I imagine there's a ton of bitching and complaining about the whole system.
Back in the day, when I first got into this world, we did in-person support groups. I used to run a support group for women going through donor egg, and you would think, no, nobody would show up because they don't want other people to know. Oh my gosh, we had the best time. We would have lunches at somebody's house. We'd do potluck lunches. Everybody would get together. The newbies would feel like it was completely normal. People made longtime friendships. I did that for years. More and more people didn't want to go to, because you could do it online, and then there was Facebook and you could have Facebook groups. It fizzled apart. The women that were in it, I still know them. Their kids are grown up now. And they said that made such a difference. And these other women are little islands out there by themselves. They think they're the only person. So it's kind of sad.
So for listeners who are just beginning their family building journey or have started it but are feeling completely overwhelmed, not even sure where to start, what would you say is the best way to connect with you and Family Solutions International?
They can come to our website, FamilySolutionsInternational.com, and in the website is our various other companies, but we do offer a lot of education and information on our website. So we talk about all these different things. I also have a company called the Fertility Consultants, which is basically meant for people to kind of go, we don't know what to do. We have a complimentary initial consultation, and then they can buy a small package to help them navigate it. Especially a lot of OBGYNs, they don't have the time. One of my dearest friends is OBGYN, and she goes, you have 15 minutes to see somebody. That doesn't give you enough time to talk about what your next step is going to be. So we just send them off to an IVF clinic, which may not be the best answer. It may eventually be the best answer. So I would say that contacting us, looking at our website, there's a lot of education on there.
Sure. You also have your own podcast, The Explanation,
Yes,
which I love.
Explanation.
Explanation. Yes, love it.
My son-in-law came up with that name, and it's like, wow, I think that's the best name. The whole point of the podcast is to discuss ethical issues in fertility. So like last week, we did one about genetic testing. What does it show? What does it not show? Genetic testing, like we were talking about before, it doesn't say your embryo is going to be good. It just says it's not going to have Tay-Sachs. We had one where we talked about posthumous reproduction, where people actually are creating children after the male partner has passed away.
Yeah, that's an ethical question for sure.
We had one where we had a geneticist come on and talk about, are you really going to be able to pick the embryo with the best IQ or the best athletic ability? And the answer right now is no, but you can sell anybody anything. So we're diving into these issues. This week's podcast is about social surrogacy, which we just talked about.
Amazing. What would you say is one thing that you hope people feel when they interact with your company?
That we're their friend and that we want to guide them during this journey. We call all of them journeys because it's a journey from the time you interact with us until you send us that announcement that you had your baby. It's a journey.
That it is. I've so appreciated you being on today and sharing your journey, your experience, and the work that you're doing so that our listeners have access to more education. That is really what we want to do at Redefine Her, because it takes a village and we're all in it. But before we wrap up, we like to pass the mic forward here. And so our last guest left a question for you. How do you know you're onto something that is going to ultimately work well, even if at first it is a struggle?
When we made the switch to a very expensive, very comprehensive client relationship management software, a CRM, it was a huge amount of money for my company. I didn't know if it was going to work because I was so embedded with this personal touch experience that I felt that going computer tech thing, and it ended up working greater than my wildest dreams. And it cut down our workload so much that we had time for other pursuits, i.e. a podcast.
Right, right. And you had to just keep going with that, even in that a huge investment, something new, a lot of change, but it made your life so much better.
In the middle of it, it was one of those things where it was one foot in front of the other, and I couldn't think past and I couldn't think forward. I had to just be in the moment, because if I started thinking about, oh my God, what if this doesn't work and I've invested 5 figures in this, what's going to happen to me?
Lovely. For yourself and maybe for the women who are on this journey, how do you take care of yourself? Because these things that are so personal can get really heavy. They can be emotionally draining. They can be mentally exhausting. They can be physically burdensome as well. How do you take care of yourself? What is your routine or your day-to-day to really, as cliche as it is, fill your cup back up?
It is hard in this field because it's 24/7. And I used to give these new patient orientation talks when I first worked at an IVF clinic. And I used to tell them, this is not cancer. It's not like you're dying or anything. The questions can wait until tomorrow, but they really can't. People need you to be present. What I've found is I have been a runner for a long, long time, and that usually clears out the cobwebs. Number one. And number two, I do a spa day. I mean, seriously, I want to go do the spa day and just go, I'm going to pamper myself. So those are the two things that I navigate, and I try to be really consistent with it.
Consistency, that is key. I just had a spa day for my birthday, and I'm like, I need to have a birthday every month because I want the spa day.
Somebody else takes care of you. You walk in, here's your little robe and here's your little slippers and you can go into the quiet room. And yeah, I love all that. And I feel like I had to savor it. So if it's a place that has like the water stuff, like they have a hot tub and then they have a cold plunge and I'm like, I have to do the circuit like 5 times.
Totally.
I get my money's worth.
Totally.
I get my money's worth.
You're in the Bay Area. Next time there is a spa there. Oh, I'll send that to you. But it is an amazing one, and it's got the circuit, and it is amazing.
Yes. I lived in San Francisco in my youth, and there's one in Japantown that is a Japanese.
Exactly.
Yes, I love it. And they have the all women's days. The one thing that I think all women that are listening to this should know is one of the things about going to that spot is on Geary Street, and it's and they have women's days, have everything. And you're naked as a jaybird. And in there is women of all kinds. There's old women, there's young women, there's women that are tattooed from stem to stern. And I remember going in my 30s and going, oh my gosh, these women, they're walking around, they're 80. And this is going to happen to you, and they don't care.
And it's beautiful, right?
It's they're beautiful, and they're uninhibited. And the older they were, the less inhibited they were. And the young ones are still wearing their bathing suits.
It's kabuki. Kabuki's freaking spa. Yeah, shout out to them. I know, it's amazing. It is
shout out to them.
It's amazing. Mary, thank you for bringing not just your expertise, but your empathy and candor to this conversation. You have really enlightened me. You've shed a light on so much when it comes to IVF and really the journey, the counseling behind it. And every data point in fertility is a human story, complicated, emotional, and in real need of support, love, and compassion. So whether you're a hopeful parent, a fellow founder, or someone navigating the gray areas of healthcare and ethics, your story has offered both a roadmap and a mirror. So thank you for joining me on Redefine Her.
Thank you for having me. It was great fun.
It was amazing. Thank you. We will link everything to the show notes, and that will include how to connect with Family Solutions International, Explanation Podcast, as well as Kabuki Spa and
I know, I
Kabuki's
can't believe it. It's the best. Isn't it the best? That is a business opportunity.
Oh, totally. I have done this.
It's so great. That whole water thing in that room where they have the steam. Oh my God, I want to go right now.
Me too. Me too.
It was so much fun talking to you. I really had a great time. Thank you so much for letting me be on your show.
Thank you too. It was lovely to have you. Thanks for joining us on this episode of Redefine Her, where we explore the bold voices, transformative ideas, and untold stories reshaping the future of women's health, wellness, and the technology that makes it all happen. I'm your host, Brenda Armstrong. Redefine Her is produced by Taryn Long and proudly sponsored by CH2 Solutions, powering innovation with purpose. If today's conversation moved you, challenged you, or sparked a new idea, we'd love for you to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Until next time, keep redefining what's possible.